My house is empty. Every room, every chair, every corner where somebody used to be. My wife of 54 years, gone. My youngest son, gone. My brother Samuel, who used to sit in that kitchen every Sunday morning, drinking bad coffee and telling the same 3 stories like we hadn't heard them 1,000 times, gone. The grandkids who used to run down that hallway so loud I'd holler for them to stop. They grew up and moved away. Last one left in 2019. And I am going to tell you something that I know sounds wrong, something that might make you think I've gone soft in the head at 91. But I need you to hear me when I say it. I have never been happier in my life. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you isn't about being glad that people are gone. It's about what happens to a man when he finally stops running. When the noise settles and all that's left is the truth he spent 90 years avoiding. I've been sitting in this chair for 3 years now, just sitting. And for the first time since I was maybe 7 years old, I finally understand what I was actually supposed to be doing with my life. If you're under 70, you need to hear this before it's too late. If you're over 70, maybe you already know. But I'm betting you don't. I'm betting you've been running just as hard as I was. My name is Clarence. I'm 91 years old. And this channel exists because I've got maybe a handful of mornings left, and I am not going to waste a single one of them staying quiet. Subscribe. Because the next story I tell might be the one that changes how you see everything. The first house I ever owned, I was 32 years old. It was 1966, and I had worked 6 years at the foundry in Gary, Indiana. Double shifts, weekends, every overtime hour they'd offer a black man back then, which wasn't many. My boss, a man named Patterson, told me flat out in 1963 that promotions were for men who fit the position. Lord knows what that meant. I knew what it meant. I didn't say a word, just kept working. By 66, I had enough saved to put a down payment on a small house on the east side. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a furnace that worked maybe 2/3 of the time. My wife Ruth stood in the kitchen the day we moved in and cried. Not because it was beautiful. It wasn't. She cried because it was ours. I remember standing in the living room that night after Ruth had gone to sleep, looking at the walls, thinking, now I need to fill this place. And that thought, fill this place, was the beginning of everything, and the beginning of the problem. Because from that day forward I measured my life by what the house contained. A wife, good. Children, better. Furniture that wasn't borrowed. A car in the driveway, a television, a washing machine. Each new thing felt like proof. Proof that I had made it. Proof that Gary, Indiana, couldn't keep me down. Proof that the man named Patterson was wrong about me. I was building something. I was certain of that. What I didn't know, what took me 60 more years to understand, is that I wasn't building a life. I was hiding inside one. My son Marcus was born in 1967. He had Ruth's eyes and my stubbornness, which is the worst possible combination in a child. From the time he could walk, that boy pushed against everything. Rules, expectations, the way I thought things ought to be done. By the time he was 15, we were barely speaking in full sentences. I told myself it was discipline. A man has to be firm. My father was firm with me, and I turned out fine, didn't I? Ruth used to say, "Clarence, you're going to lose that boy." I told her she was being soft. I told her boys needed hard fathers. I had a hard father, and I was grateful for it. She'd go quiet in that way she had. Not angry, just tired. In 1987, Marcus moved to Atlanta. told me he needed to breathe. Those were his exact words. "I need to breathe, Daddy." I stood at the door when he drove away, and I felt something I didn't have a name for at the time. I know the name now. It was the beginning of a silence I would spend the next 20 years pretending I didn't notice. We talked, holidays, us birthdays, the usual. But there was a wall, and I had built every brick of it, and I kept pretending I didn't know how. He died in 2009. Heart attack, 52 years old. I flew to Atlanta for the funeral, and I sat in the front row, and I shook hands with people who knew my son, people who loved my son. And I realized I didn't know half the stories they were telling. I had been in that house, filling it, proving things, and my son had been out there living, and I had missed most of it. If something about that is hitting you somewhere deep, stay. Subscribe to this channel, because I have more to say, and I'm running out of time to say it. Here is what nobody tells you about a full house. A full house is loud, not just with voices, with need, with obligation, with the endless list of things that need doing, paying, fixing, managing, worrying over. When the house is full, you are always in motion. And when you are always in motion, you never have to sit still long enough to ask yourself the one question that will change everything. Am I actually living? Or am I just performing the life I was supposed to want? I spent 60 years performing. The performance looked like this: wake up early, work hard, come home, take care of what needed taking care of, provide, protect, repeat. I never once, not once, stopped to ask myself if this was what I actually wanted. Not because I was miserable. I wasn't always miserable. There was love in that house. There were good years. But I was running a script that somebody else wrote, and I was running it so fast I never had time to read the whole thing. My friend Otis, God rest him, he retired in 1995 and was dead by 1997. 2 years. His wife told me at the funeral that he didn't know what to do with himself, that he just sat down and faded. I nodded and thought, what a shame. Didn't understand a word of it. Now I do. Otis spent 40 years being defined by what he did and what he provided. When the providing stopped, he had nothing underneath it. No self, no center. Just the empty shape of a role he'd been playing so long he forgot there was a man inside it. I almost did the same thing. When Ruth died in 2015, I thought the world had ended. The house felt like a wound. I didn't know what to do with the silence. I was 80 years old, and I genuinely did not know how to be alone, because I had never actually been alone with myself. Not really. For the first 2 years, I filled the silence with noise, television, phone calls, grandchildren visiting, anything to avoid sitting in that chair and facing what was there. And then one morning in 2017, something stopped me. I was walking to the kitchen to turn the television on, and I stopped in the middle of the hallway, and I just didn't. I sat down on the floor. Right there in the hallway, an 82-year-old black man sitting on the floor of a house in Gary, Indiana, and I just let the silence be silence. It took about 20 minutes before I stopped waiting for something to happen. And then something happened. I started to hear myself. I am not going to tell you that I found God in that hallway. I already had God. The Lord had been walking with me for 82 years, and I knew His presence. That wasn't new. What was new was this. I found Clarence, not the worker, not the provider, not the husband or the father, or the man who had something to prove to Patterson and every other person who ever looked at me like I was less than what I was. Not the man with the full house and the car in the driveway. Just Clarence, the boy from Mississippi who liked to draw pictures of birds. The young man who secretly wanted to be a teacher, but was told the money wasn't there. The person underneath all the performance. And here is what I found when I met him. He wasn't angry. He had made peace with most of it a long time ago, in ways I hadn't given him credit for. He wasn't bitter about the years at the foundry, or the promotions that went to men named Patterson. He had survived things he was never given enough credit for surviving. But he was lonely. Lord, was he lonely. Not from lack of people. The house had been full of people. He was lonely because for 60 years nobody, including me, had ever really asked him who he was, what he wanted, what he thought about when the house was quiet. When I understood that, I cried for the first time since Ruth's funeral, and then I picked myself up off that hallway floor, walked to the kitchen, made coffee, sat down at the table and asked myself a question I should have asked at 32, standing in that empty house. What do I actually love? Not what I was supposed to love, not what proved something. What did I actually love? The answer surprised me. It was simple. It was quiet. It was nothing like the life I had built. I love mornings. I love birds. I love a good sentence in a book. I love the way light comes through that kitchen window in October. I love silence that feels like company instead of absence. I had been surrounded by those things my whole life and never once stopped to receive them. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in a quiet room and just let it be quiet? When was the last time you asked yourself, not your role, not your obligations, not the version of you that exists in other people's eyes, but yourself? What do I actually love? You think you're too busy. You think there's time for that later, when things settle down, when the kids are grown, when the mortgage is paid, when the job calms down. I thought the same thing. The kids grew up, the mortgage got paid, the job ended, and I was 80 years old, and I had no idea who I was when the performance stopped. Don't do what I did. Don't wait until the house is empty to find out what lives inside you, because here is the truth I have learned sitting in this chair for the last 3 years. The empty house isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is all the years I spent filling it with noise, so I wouldn't have to hear the silence that was trying to tell me something. The house is empty now, and in that emptiness I have found the fullest version of myself I have ever known. I'm 91 years old, and I have never been happier. Not because everyone is gone, but because I finally stopped running and sat down and let myself be found. Whatever you are running from, stop, just for one morning. Sit in the silence, let it speak. I promise you, what's waiting in that silence is the life you were supposed to be living all along. This is Clarence, 91 years old, and this channel exists because the truth I learned too late doesn't have to be too late for you. If something in these words found a place in you, subscribe, because the next story I tell might be the one you were waiting your whole life to hear.